Welcome to Duxbury In Depth. I'm Julie Thompson, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by the new police chief in Duxbury, Michael Carbone. Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
You've been the interim, and now you are the full chief.
Yes.
So congratulations on that promotion.
Thank you.
And for those that might not know you or your background, can you talk a little bit about where you grew up and how you got to be where you are today?
Well, I grew up in Duxbury. I went to school right from kindergarten all the way to high school in Duxbury. I've just been practically my whole life in Duxbury. When I graduated high school in 1984, I shortly then after got on to the police department in 1989, and I've been on the Duxbury Police Department ever since.
Okay. Did you always want to be a police officer?
No, actually, no, I didn't. I got into construction, doing like fine carpentry and cabinet making, and I had a good friend of mine, and I had an uncle who was a retired New York sergeant on the police department, and I just kind of had a little bit of an interest in it.
Yeah.
So I took the civil service exam,
Yeah.
and boom, and here I am.
And there you go, all these years later.
Yep.
So you've done many things. You were an accident reconstructionist,
Yes.
a prosecutor, a detective, an operations lieutenant. Can you talk about those different roles and what they brought to you?
Well, when I started on the police department, I was just a patrol officer.
Yep.
You know, I worked various shifts. And then I got interested into a specialty, which was like accident reconstruction.
Yep.
And that's an extensive course. It's actually, there's the basics, then there's the advanced, and then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of math. It's not easy. It was myself and there's one other officer in the department that went through the whole training. So I did that, and then I was promoted to detective, and I was on doing detective work. I worked 4 to 12's detective for a while, and
Yeah.
And then I got promoted to sergeant, went back to patrol.
Yeah.
I was a shift supervisor for an extensive period of time, and then I became the department's prosecutor, which is important because it's basically the liaison between the department and the courts, all
Right.
courts, Brockton
Right.
Court, Plymouth Court, any court that we deal with. And that's important because
So any case that involved the Duxbury PD, you would be the one that would go to court and testify.
well, not testify,
Okay.
but I would be the one who would bring the paperwork to court and work with the district attorney's office.
Got it.
And any other victim advocates or any other court personnel.
Okay.
I would work with. And again, that is extremely important. People don't realize how important it is to have that connection with the courts, especially now, the way policing is today.
Sure.
And then after that, I did that for a while. Then I was promoted to, from there, I actually went back to patrol as a shift supervisor. And shortly thereafter, I was the detective sergeant. And I did that for a while. Then I was promoted to operations lieutenant.
Yeah.
I did that for a while. And the operations lieutenant basically is in charge of all operations of the whole police department.
Okay.
And that just, the responsibilities just are endless with
They're
that.
huge, right?
And then I became the deputy chief.
Yeah.
I was the deputy chief for about 3.5 years or so. And then the most recent chief, he retired in December, and I became the interim in January, and here I am.
And here you are. You also have a very coveted FBI Law Enforcement Development Association Trilogy Award. Can you talk about that? Because not many chiefs have that.
No, what that is a 3-phase of training through the FBI. It starts with the FBI supervisor's leadership, and that's a 2-week course. And then there's the command, which is another 2-week course. And then there's the executive, which is another 2-week course. And then after that is you earn your trilogy. Once you complete those 3 phases, you earn your trilogy. And basically, it's very an elite accomplishment. It's a very intense, consuming course to go through, and once you're done with it and you earn your trilogy, you realize how
important it was,
how important it is, and what you've accomplished.
Good for you, and good for the town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Learn a lot.
Yeah.
And the materials you get, you basically have those materials for the rest of your career.
Right.
It's such a important piece of
Of policing.
policing.
Yeah. So, what exactly does what is the police chief responsible for? I know it's probably everything, but
Yeah, in Duxbury, where we're relatively, I wouldn't say a small department, but a medium-sized department. The police chief is involved in everything, and he has to be, or she has to be, because you're right down to patrol. You have to know the officers. You have to know who they are, their families, what they do, and you have to be involved. You have to not only be involved in the community, that's another whole thing, but you have to be involved in your department, and you have to actually know who's working for you and what they're doing. And all through all the detectives, your lieutenants, everybody. It's important. Obviously, in larger departments, when you have chiefs and you have, your superintendents and all that, it's a lot different.
It's right. It's completely different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Whereas the chief, it's more hands-on, and you have to know your people.
Right. And to that point, you weren't automatically promoted to permanent chief. You were made interim chief, and the search committee was formed by the town, and 38 people actually applied for this job.
Yes.
It got whittled down to 4, and you were the unanimous selection out of the 4. So a couple things could be drawn from that. Number one, it was a good lesson for the town, or a good exercise for the town to go through, just to see what else is out there. What are the components that make a great chief? And then B, we made a really good choice. We made a really good choice in the guy that we picked. Because to your point, you've been in this town, you know the culture, you know the people, you know the environment, you know the officers. And I would think that is a huge leg up on anyone who's going to run a department.
Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, when it was first announced, I have to say I was like, oh, really?
You mean when the search committee was announced?
You kind of say, well, why? But then you quickly realize why? Because in today's policing, the right person has to be in the seat, and you realize when you look at other departments who have just appointed a chief here and there, sometimes things don't just work out. And I had a conversation with Rainey, and he said,
the town manager, Rainey Reed.
Rainey Reed, and he said, you're doing a great job and everything, but you have to understand that this town deserves to make sure that we have the right seat, the right person.
Right, in the seat.
In the seat.
Right.
And now I realize it. No, I realize it. After going through all of that, and then, taking a look at what was accomplished, I realized that is important. It's important to the people of the town.
Exactly.
It's not important as much to me as it is to them.
Right.
They need to have the right person.
Right.
And, I went in there with the right mindset. I went in there saying to myself, I want this job. I deserve this job.
Yep.
I've been in this town, and I know what the residents want. I know what the department needs, and I'm going to accomplish that. So I went in there with that attitude. Good. And I think that helped me, because
of course it did.
At the end, it
was you.
It was, yes.
Win-win for you and for the town. So let's talk about what you think of Duxbury kind of as a really sleepy town. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of things that go on in Duxbury. So what day to day, what does the department do?
Well, it's not as sleepy as people think.
Okay, good.
Okay,
talk about that.
We have our share of crime, as people see every now and then in the papers. However, it's certainly not a city.
Right.
But I like to brag, so to speak, that the reason why the town is so safe and the reason why the town is what it is because the men and women do such a great job. The officers, They do a great job. They're very proactive. They're very, they're very conscious of what's going on throughout the town, and we address it. I mean, as simple as if there's speeding on one street, we will address that issue.
Right.
If there's a problem with a family issue, we'll address that issue. We don't just ignore it and move on to the next.
Right.
And we have that luxury because, again, we're not so crazy busy that we just forget about things and move on to the next call.
Right.
You know, that's why today's officers are, you know, we're not just peacemakers, we're problem solvers, and we can talk about that. But these officers do so much. I mean, again, where we're at a smaller department.
Yeah.
Officers are more or less have to do everything. You know, it's not like.
So what does that mean?
Well, when they go to call,
Yep.
they're it. They have to handle it from
Okay.
top to bottom. Whereas you see in larger departments, they may go to a call and then they say, you know what, call in crime scene. You know what, call in the
Call in
domestic
specialist. Yeah.
specialist,
Right.
domestic violence unit, or call in the gang unit or whatever.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't have that.
Right.
So these officers have to be trained from A to Z
Right.
and have that experience and knowledge. Yes, there are a lot of specialties that we can call in, whether
If you
from
need
other
it.
agencies
Yep.
that we need it.
Sure.
But these officers own it, and every small department, that basically they own it.
Right. And how is your technology? Is the technology in Duxbury pretty well advanced?
It is.
Okay. Can you
and
talk about that?
Yeah, as far as technology goes, we have the latest technology when it comes to radio communications systems, police cruisers, computer systems, and stuff like that. We're working on, and in probably within the next few years, we'll start seeing body cams.
Yep.
That's a work in progress, and stuff like that. I think as far as the technology goes, you have to be slightly cautious, because if you rush into those things, they kind of come back and
Right.
bite you.
Right. And you have to be
Because-
trained. You have to keep up with the software updates and things like that. Right.
And,
right.
You know, you have to reach out to other departments to,
Right.
you know, for example, body cams. You know, we came very close to getting body cams, and there was some issues with them, and we're still working on it. And I have talked to other chiefs who have implemented body cams, and they're having a lot of problems with the technology
Yeah.
and the compute, you know, the software and whatnot. So it's stuff like that you don't rush
Right.
into.
You want to vet it perfectly before you get it. Vet it before you get it. Yeah.
Vet it before you get it.
Now, what about, like in every town, the police, I assume, know who has firearms permits.
Mm-hmm.
Which houses do you constantly get called for certain calls, whether it's abuse or whether it's neglect or whether it's somebody needs help all the time? So the public understands, how do you kind of manage that information?
Through our CAD system, our RMS, which is record management system.
Okay.
So for the most part, if there's a call at an address, there's all sorts of warnings that could pop up. You can see if there's firearms, if the person's licensed to carry,
Yep.
you know, all sorts of things, mental health issues.
Yep.
And quite frankly, you see the whole history
Okay.
of the...
Anything at that address?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
or that person. If
or the
a
person.
Yes.
So it arms the officer with the knowledge to know what they're going into.
Yep,
And sometimes does that inform who will go to the call?
Yes.
Or who might also go to the call?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, you know, we're getting into today policing. I would say 99% of the calls require backup.
Right. And give me a couple examples. What do you mean?
Well, domestic violence calls, that's 2 officer minimum.
Yeah.
Any disturbance call, 2 officer minimum. Motor vehicle accidents, a 2 officer minimum.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is you run into the fact that in the years past, we were able to run light.
Yeah.
We can't
do
run
it
light
anymore.
anymore. You can't run light anymore. You can't just have 2, 3 officers on the road, because all it takes is one call to tie up those 2 officers. And that's another thing. Calls today take so much longer. You know, a motor vehicle crash could take up to 4 hours with all the report writing and everything. A domestic case, if there's an arrest, it could take up to 6 hours. It'll tie up an officer for hours.
So talk about over the years how a police officer's job has gone from, like you said, a simple, you know, one guy can make the call, he can write a report, bring it back to the station, to now I have to notify X, 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 and X.
Well, a call, let's just say you go to a family disturbance, and, you know, years past, the officer would go there. It might be 1 or 2 officers that go there, and they'd just restore peace.
Yeah.
If one of the family members had to leave for the night, they'd tell them to leave for the night.
Sure.
Now, they go there and they want to know the problem. What's the problem? Do you need help? Do you need a clinician to come in? Which now we do have a part-time clinician.
I was going to ask you, a mental health clinician
Yes.
that will work with your officers for cases like that.
Yes.
Which is wonderful.
Yes, that's an
Wonderful.
up-and-coming thing, and
Yeah.
I can guarantee you in years to come, you're going to see full-time clinicians in
Absolutely.
every department.
Yep.
So an officer would, deal with that. Now, if there's children involved, he has to get, services. Again, if there's mental health involved and it needs to be addressed right then and there, then we're into another whole phase of. So the officers now are problem solvers.
Right.
They go there in the mindset of, yes, we'll keep the peace and we'll have to, arrest somebody if they have to be, or
Yeah.
protective custody if somebody has to be taken into protective custody. But the same token, they need to resolve the problem.
Right.
And that's what they're basically trained to do now. The
Yeah.
training is extensive.
It's almost like in an ER, if you work in an ER, you treat a patient and then they're gone. You do the paperwork and they move on. It's not like that.
No.
You will have follow-ups upon follow-ups that might go weeks or even months based on whatever your officers had to respond to.
Yes, and especially with any mental health or
Yeah.
addiction issues, we have a CIT unit, which is crisis intervention team,
Okay.
and those officers do follow-ups, and now they do it with actually a clinician. So if they happen to see an issue that happened on the midnight shift, they will follow up the next day with the family or person to guide them in the right direction to get them help, and
Right.
it's working.
Yeah.
It works most of the time. It works. So obviously there's a lot of people that don't want help, and they
That's fine.
but it's working.
Good.
It is working, and it's helping the future of policing. Without a doubt.
That's wonderful to hear. We hear a lot about the calls that you go on might have mental health issues attached to them. I wonder how the police department has to stay stoic and professional. And you're humans.
Yes.
These things, when you see things that bother you, it must affect you. How do you handle the mental health issues or just challenges that your staff goes through?
So wellness in the police department is bigger than ever, and there's training for it, mandatory training for it. But I think the biggest thing now is to recognize it, and it's not easy, because especially something, we can always recognize a broken finger or
Sure.
an injury, right?
Sure.
But when something's going on in the mind, it's very difficult
Yep.
to detect it.
Right.
So if it is detected, and it usually starts with a peer officer or a first line supervisor, it needs to be addressed. And I think more and more officers are realizing that they're not shamed anymore for coming forward
Sure.
and saying, look, I've got a problem. Or,
Having a hard time with
something's
this.
going
Yeah.
on here.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things is getting their family involved too. But as far as wellness goes, we have so many avenues that we have put in place for these officers. And it means we have special peer support groups that can come in and talk to officers, which we've done in the past numerous times. Just recently, about a year or so ago, I built an app. There's a wellness app specifically for the Duxbury Police Department.
Oh, good for you.
And it's not a cure-all. It's not, hey, we developed an app and we're all set here.
Yeah.
It's just an information.
It's a tool.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool that the officers have. And I was very pleasantly surprised of the feedback I got from a lot of officers saying how cool it was, and how all this information's at their fingertips. It has self-assessments. It's, and so that's helped. But that's just a piece of the pie. There's just so many avenues. But again, I think early detection is so important, and it's not easy. But that also goes back to being a chief and knowing his department.
I was just going to say that.
And I make it a point to, what's going on if one of the officers has a new child is brought into their life. I go and I talk to them to see how things are going.
Sure.
And how's everything? How's the family?
You lose a lot of sleep.
And hopefully get a read on if there's how their stress level's going. And and obviously, when there is a incident that is at a level of, we need to look at this. We make it mandatory to have a debriefing. And at the debriefing is when you have to detect whether or not we need to bring in services and have these officers talk to someone special. And we have made that mandatory in the past, and it's helped. Because as you know, police officers, as much as they realize now that wellness is an issue, they are still stubborn. So making things mandatory may sound kind of mean, but in the end it works.
You're protecting the department.
Protecting them.
And them. Yep.
And I think that's important.
Absolutely. So what are your goals and plans for your department in Duxbury? How can you make it better?
Always advancing in technology, because that's always a foot race. I just mentioned our RMS system, our records management system. We're going to be going to a better system of more data friendly, so that we can actually track data a lot better, whether it be traffic data or crime data. It's so much better on the reporting part of it. So that's going to be happening. That's probably 18 months from now, but we're working on that.
Do you share information too between towns and between the state police and the sheriff's departments?
We do. We share a lot of that information through our records management system, and those departments that are not on that system, there are other sources that we can get that information. And at a minimum, you can pick up the phone and call them and get it. Yeah. But yeah, as far as technology goes, body cams, you're going to see that. Yep. And the technology in these police cruisers now are so advanced, and I'm talking about everything, not just the computer systems in them, the lighting systems, because now they're making lighting, all those blue flashy lights that, don't affect the eyes, that don't hurt people's eyes. Yeah. And it's amazing, like the technology that's coming out.
It's advancing in leaps and bounds. You have to keep up with it.
You have to keep up with it.
As the police chief, you have to know what's going on. What's the newest software? What's the newest thing out there? And would my department benefit from it? And
it goes right down to training. What's the newest training? Firearms training. Firearms. It just everything is evolving, and you have to keep up with it if you want to be a very up to date police department.
And that's kind of summarizes what so many people don't know, is how much you need to know, how many things you have to be informed about, how many subjects you have to at least have a way of finding out how to get that information. And lastly, the reputations of police departments often take huge hits because of one bad apple. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think, that's unfortunate that you have a simple incident of one individual and it affects the whole department. But I think if you get the message out there that, hey, we recognize the problem and we're dealing with it and we're addressing it, it shows that you're very proactive in keeping the department at its highest standards.
Absolutely.
And we're an accredited police department. Yep. Our policies, our procedures are all highest standards, and and it comes from the chief. Yeah. If you have to be at those high standards and expect everybody else to be, and they'll respect that. Officers will respect that if the chief respects it, and I do. And unfortunately, I think when you do have an issue, as long as you address it correctly and you address it swiftly and you take care of the issue, I think it sends the message to the residents and the people that, hey, there's trust.
Right, and that's what you need more than anything.
Yes.
And people can find out all about your department on the website.
Yes,
you have a good website.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Our website has everything you need.
Really good police website.
And if it's not there, call 5656-934-5656 and we'll get it.
Okay. Yeah, it's really pretty.
Yes, it's very.
Compared to other police departments in the area, your website's amazing.
It's quite amazing, and I have to give credit to a lot of the officers who have built it, and with the information, and who keep up to date with a lot of information on it. And it does seem, some people have come back and said, well, it's a very busy website. Well, it can be, but if you're looking for something, it's there.
Right, you can find it.
Yep,
you can find it. And how do people get in touch with you or make suggestions, or how do you want people residents and businesses in Duxbury to interact with the police department?
I want, obviously, them to interact with us as much as possible, and I tell the officers that. I make sure that the officers realize that the community is the most important piece. Whether it's the residents of Duxbury or the visitors of Duxbury, we need to make sure that they're safe, they have trust in us, and they can come to us with a problem. And, you know, I think we are building on that, and we're getting there, and there's always room for improvement on that. But as far as the community, feel free anytime you can walk in that police station and ask a question. You can call the police station. Everybody has a phone extension. We have an email system. You can get all that on the website. And again, you know, we are certainly...
You've opened doors.
Open doors to the... Yes.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful.
Yes.
And we'll have you back again maybe a year from now or so and see what's going on and what new technology do you have.
I would love to. Okay. Absolutely, that'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Julie Thompson and Chief Michael Carbone, and this is Duxbury In Depth.
Thank you.